A couple of us might have to stand, but that's okay. Okay, so we'll do a bit of a little bit of dialogue now. We have three people with mics here: Yasmin, Debbie, and Sarah. So if you put your hand up, and then we'll go over to the audience to answer questions. It just occurred to me that there's no mic for the audience, for the speakers to use. Sarah, do you mind if we keep hold of one mic, actually? Thanks. Okay. It's tolerating uncertainty, we're good at that. Okay, first question. Yeah.
My name is Dominic, I'm from Mind. I feel very inspired by some of the presentations that the various people gave. It left me with a question, being a survivor of mental health system psychiatry myself. And sometimes the difficulty that I have with wearing that hat and making it fit when I'm at work, to just say, I'm a survivor, and actually having that feel like it adds value to the work that I'm doing. And I wanted to put that to the panel who have got direct experience themselves and say, some of you were occupational therapists and others were working in psychology in different roles. My question is, how did it feel? Or how does it feel? Or do you have an opportunity at all when you're at work to suspend the other hat of the worker hat and just be yourself as a person who's lived and have it add value in the conversations that you have with the peers, in the spirit of the peer support element of the open dialogue?
Okay, thank you. Lauren, do you want to take this? Or is there anybody who wants to? Yeah? Okay.
My experience has been that probably up until quite recently, I have not been that open about my own lived experience. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to come and speak today, to sort of integrate my personal life and my professional life, because I work for NELFT. There are quite a few of my colleagues in the audience who I've bumped into and said hello to, and I was aware of that. And to empower myself, I felt that it would be a good opportunity to come and speak openly about my experiences. So in the workplace directly, I've spoken to some colleagues, I've told them about my experiences, and I think it just helps to sort of break down the stigma. It helps to challenge people's views. I work in primary care, people may have a very limited view of secondary care and what severe and enduring mental illness looks like. So if I can present myself to them as a person who has survived, who's thriving, who's functioning, that can really challenge some of their points of view and help them to understand, the person at the centre of the process.
We've got someone over here.
We've got somebody?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm really encouraged to hear all your bravely shared stories. I want to play devil's advocate a little bit though and ask, is there any group of people that this doesn't work for, this approach? I'm thinking, for example, people who don't have much in the way of family support or a network around them.
Okay, so I guess I'll just say something quickly about that. I mean, we've organised it in a way that it can be delivered for individuals. So we have some people who are individuals who will see, and family can be brought virtually into the room. So you can ask about other members of the family and what would so-and-so say if he were here today. Also, by trying to create local peer communities, we're trying to make it so that people can also form networks through the work that we do. So there'll be groups of people who will have had lived experience who can join together with others too, and also help form networks that way. Anybody else want to say anything? Okay, thank you. Next.
Thank you so much. I'm very struck in this moment by the community that's in front of us. And this does seem to be a shift from the medical model to a community paradigm. And I think my question's for John, really. So John, I'm really intrigued for you as a chief executive about how radical this change has been for you as a leader. And I'm interested in your insights or what you might share with us for other chief executives up and down the country about how do we create the conditions for what we could think of as organisational readiness for this paradigm shift, because it does feel. Now, how radical do we need to be? How challenging has it been for you? For example, are you using dialogue in the boardroom? Are you changing the way leaders? Because it seems to me for it to be congruent, completely coherent, we would change the way we lead, we'd change the way we think, we'd change the way we relate to a more relationally intelligent map of the world.
I think it's a very challenging question and an intriguing one. I guess we do think differently and behave differently, and if that were not the case, we wouldn't be going down this road. Whether or not I was kind of moved by Russell and the team, or the concept, or how that came about, I don't know, because the one thing I would say at the moment, if you saw Lord Crisp's report on the acute care pathway of mental health that was published last month or the month before, he clearly cites NELFT as being pretty outstanding. But I think we've got a mindset where we've always said, okay, that's really good, but it won't do for the future. Clearly the evidence here today says that won't do for the future. So we would always be looking for something more innovative and creative. Clearly, for me, open dialogue is that opportunity. If you want to be really good, you have to take risks, and I think we're taking risks. But the real inspiration is, you know, you hear the story, the Lee family, Sue and her story. When you hear that, it's incontrovertible evidence that feels to me I'm taking less of a risk than maybe I thought I was.
Okay, other questions?
Can I? Yeah. So I'm Isam from NELFT. It's quite powerful up till now, you know, the stories we have heard, and quite emotional. It has shaken us, I'm sure lots of us, with the way we are practicing till yet. I qualified in 2003. All the psychiatry or mental health service I've worked in is in UK. So I've learned everything around here. So whatever bad habits I've learned, partly blamed for NHS in a way. But there is some good stuff as well. There is some good stuff. And I think what particularly this approach has helped me realize is that the system has made us partly firefighting and thinking as if we are making a big difference in people's lives, while actually for them it may not be a big difference, but we feel we have done the outcome we went for. End of story. Let's wait for the next outcome, next crisis. And this approach can clearly pay dividends. The challenge again would be, as the question asked earlier, was about the implementation of it, but we have to start somewhere, I guess, and that could be our contribution, particularly in NELFT, to start somewhere. We'll have challenges, I'm very sure, how to implement with our caseloads, KPIs, everything else. And I'm sure John will help us in somehow, you know, how do we achieve them, but focus on POD, which clearly you can see with the clients. It's working and it's for them. We claim it's patient-centered service. So if they say it's patient-centered, we have to believe them and follow it. So yeah, that's my...
Thank you, Sam. Anybody want to reflect? James?
I just want to say something about after John's comment. I was thinking about how you do operationalise it in the NHS, and two things came to mind. One is that we do need to take this into the boardrooms, into our chief executives. It's only worked in Kent because we have chief exec sign up, because we have medical director, director of operations sign up. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think we need to be a bit more cute about how we speak to the sceptical voices, just to voice those and think about those. I think they're possibly absent and could be part of a downfall, but those are two things that come to mind.
John?
This ain't no question directed at one person, except for Annie at the very beginning. I listened to a message, first of all, in Ashford at the Open Dialogue last year, and I heard it 3 times now, and I've kept asking and asking, and I think that's a good message, positive input on a CD, that actually let more people listen to it. Also, I'd like to say thank you to everyone else who's actually shared their story, what they've been through, and as a carer for 3 people, I'm going through that now, and I do find it hard to keep my family safe. It is, but I'm really enjoyed, but appreciate what you've been through, what you told us, and how I can look at things differently as well, looking my family safe. Thank you.
Hello, I'm John Crowley from the University of Greenwich, and I sat here in the early 90s listening to that structured family work and psychosis as being the way forward. And I guess did the training, and with my colleagues in behavioural family work, we've done many, many years of practice. Can I top up my existing skills? Because actually that might be a way of saving the NHS, rather than trying to recreate something that's very new. There's a lot of practitioners out there who are very family orientated, who can actually perhaps with a bit of upskilling and perhaps a value questioning, maybe we can join you in promoting this sort of open dialogue process.
I guess that one of the key innovations recently has been in the training itself and trying to evolve it in a way that clinicians across the board can access and build their skills on the basis of wherever they're coming from. The original training in Tornio was a 3-year degree that everybody had to do, and clearly if that was maintained then it wouldn't be possible to roll it out anywhere else. But we've got it down to a kind of 1-year course that people can do. Pretty much everybody, whatever their background, finds that they have a lot to gain from going on the course. So we're also trying to organise local delivery, so ways of delivering the training locally in individual teams. So as time goes on, we're finding more and more flexible ways for people to be able to be trained in it. So that's kind of developing over time.
A very quick additional remark, if I may, about James, your comment about Chief Executive and Ops Director's sign-up. I think that's fantastic. I actually think we need what we're getting from John today, which is embodiment, which is different to sign-up. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Good point. Can we top up family interventions, BFT, training with open dialogue? I think it takes us halfway. I think there's open dialogue presents those of us who work with families in other theoretical models. It presents us with a challenge to unlearn quite a lot of what we've tried to do in those models. Yes, we can go halfway, but then there's the unlearning of all the stuff we have been taught in systemic or in behavioural family work. Mainly about so one of the questions that I've always asked is, what's the active ingredient of change for this model? And I think there's something in family work and psychological therapies that we've always sought this active ingredient. Is it interpretations? Is it challenging negative automatic thoughts? Or is it psychoeducational support? And open dialogue challenges us to take off those and row back from them and trust the process of the principles that the family find their way there. And I think that's quite a challenge for us in the NHS.
I think on top of that as well, if, open dialogue is just a part of it, and I think is it about 30% of the actual, in Finland, about a third of the contact they have is actually open dialogue. If a family wants another intervention, it can also happen. So if a family say, well, maybe want to try CBT, as long as it's agreed in the meeting by the whole network, they can go on and do that separately or alongside, and hopefully, if there is capacity, the CBT therapists will also become part of the network as well. It's like what Sadie was saying earlier, I am part of the Open Dialogue team, but I was also doing my own support work alongside and doing some one-to-one, so there's always space for everything. It's not as if it's all Open Dialogue.
Yes, I just wanted to respond and say that I know there's many people within the Open Dialogue team that are working very hard behind the scenes. But I and Yasmin Ishaq in Kent have been to many service user forums and carer groups. And I would just like to say that everywhere we've been, people have said to us, this is what we need now, this is what we want. And I just passionately believe that we need to get this incorporated as soon as we can.
I have a question. Hello? I have a question. It sort of relates to when people who are in an open dialogical service require hospitalisation. I know in Finland that the inpatient team is part of the open dialogue team, and I'm wondering how that's being implemented in this country, because I know how traumatic and disheartening it is for many people to be admitted to a hospital where there is actually no one listening. So I'm just sort of curious about that, because that's really where a lot of damage is done for people in these custodial type environments.
I have one patient at the moment who's currently an inpatient, and we're doing open dialogue with him, and we're having our network meetings in the ward. They also have an inpatient team looking after them, but we kind of collaborate. So key decisions, for example, around longer term medication or anything like that, we will make in the network meetings, and the consultant, who's the inpatient consultant, is liaising with me all the time, and they'll also have some ward rounds. We're looking at various permutations at the moment. We also have an inpatient consultant who's on our training, who in the trial will also be involved. So there's different ways of doing it, but at least what we'll need is a degree of collaboration. We'll also provide some basic training to the inpatient and acute services, so the home treatment team services, so that they understand how this works, and we can fit in with them in terms of the way we deliver it. So yeah, we're working on that collaborative.
Is there any opportunity for an exchange of staff? I remember working in a community team with a colleague who'd been an inpatient nurse for many years and went to visit a patient in his home and was completely astounded by the difference in the way this man presented in his own home compared to the way he was in the ward. And I think that those sort of experiences are going to be crucial, I suppose.
Yeah, staff exchange is a good idea. It was worth you coming all the way from Australia to tell us. Still is a guy from Australia, by the way.
Just a moment to respond as well, because you asked about the board. Sue's been to the board, and the board needs to be open to listening and hearing the experience on the day. I'm not an expert in this, I'm the chief executive. Russell and the other clinicians are the experts, and they need to advise me about the changes that we need into the future. This will evolve, and the board needs to respond accordingly.
Okay. More hands up. Yeah, Jen, and then also...
Yeah. I think this morning has been very moving, and I think from having conversations with people have been really, really impressed the way we started off the day with the voices of the people who probably can persuade more people than others how important it is. So, has anybody thought about encouraging commissioners to come to an event like this? Is it something that we've...
Yeah,
yes.
We have, yeah.
Yeah, right. So how can we try harder, to do it better?
Okay, so good, very good question, and there's two responses. One is that we've tried to get commissioners in the room, and we have some. Not an easy group of people to find, but where we found them, we brought them out of the woodwork. Now, there will be a talk specifically about this at the end of the day by Katie, because what we've done is we've looked at how people can actually get engaged in their local communities to be part of their commissioning group, because they do need patient representatives, and getting involved in the patient reference group in your local CCG can start to change the way they commission services, because they're the guys with all the purse strings. So we're going to talk about that strategically, how to get involved wherever you live at the end of the day.
And one very minor thing, just looking at the programme, I just wondered if you could think, if you're doing it again, of another way of putting receiving pod, because that doesn't describe to me how I think it's happening. So just rethink that word for next time, please. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, Austin Somerville from North Essex.
Austin, hi Austin.
How are you? I was on the pod training last year and yeah, greatly valued the experience. It's changed my practice. And I'm delighted to be here, and I particularly enjoyed hearing the voices of so many people who have found open dialogue a useful medium to help them through their mental health problems. I'm working in a service that has a lot of people with that tries to help a lot of people with difficulties with trauma, past trauma, and so I was particularly impressed with the narrative that Suzanne gave us. I was curious about her mental health washing machine and the things that she would have gone through. I'm a convert to open dialogue, but I'm also very aware that there are other approaches. For example, EMDR, CAT, both of which kind of are part of NICE guidance in terms of treating trauma, or people who have experienced trauma. And I'm wondering, Suzanne, what it was about open dialogue that particularly helped you to wring out your washing in your washing machine.
Nobody had ever asked me about my past before. Nobody. They'd asked me how I was, but nobody had ever asked me how I ever got led to this point, or I ever got to that point. And I always felt very, very, very disloyal and guilty for what had happened to me. And because I thought it was all my fault, and I could never talk about it. So I backed away from, if they were trying to, you know, get me to talk, I'd be like, no, it was fine, everything was wonderful. But it wasn't. And then, as I say, then I had to unpack all this baggage and everything else, and it was only really Russell and Bev that did it for me, by helping me and giving me the space that I needed. And then once I started, I was like a steam train, I couldn't stop. So, yeah. It took me a long while.
Thank you for coming here today.
Yes, okay.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Victoria and I'm a MAD Alliance member. MAD stays not for crazy in this case, but stays for making a difference with SUN. And SUN is a national service user network. And I'm very glad to be here today. And you don't know, but I'm one of your most believer, firm fan of open dialogue. Because for me, dialogue is the initial step in the creation of value. So I believe a lot in your work, and I really hope that the UK, all over UK, can be covered by the open dialogue approach. But my question is, what about those people who are hiding behind the scenes and suffering? How do we approach them? What about awareness? What about prevention? Because we always look at the effects and we always cure the effects. But what about the cause? Where are these people? How can we reach them? How can we approach them? So are you thinking about prevention? Are you thinking to make awareness as well to those who are hiding and they are scared to come forward?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big issue, a very important one. I think to talk about what's happened in Tornio in Finland, because it's been happening now for over 30 years, the stigma has actually reduced. You know, people are not going into services and not receiving the labels. So it's much more acceptable to talk about the trauma and their experiences, and are actually seeking support much earlier in the process. So it will take quite a while, but I think there's this sense, yes, trauma is something that we shouldn't hide behind. You know, it should be something we actually think about. So I hope that will have the impact of eventually would be the same.
Also in Havering, myself, Sue and Sally are working on setting up a support group for people and families who have been through the pod system, but we're also hoping to widen that at some point, once we get some funding, to people that maybe will need it. So instead of them having been through before they even get to that point, and maybe, so those that don't maybe qualify for the pod, if we can have that sort of supportive network where it's safe and it's okay to talk about those things that, you know, I talk to little green men from the panic dog out my window, that's fine, because you're not made to feel abnormal, or you've just grown another head when you say, I've got a mental health problem, which has been my experience my entire life, which...
But please, as a service user, as a carer for my 2 daughters suffering mental health, as a peer supporter, and as a firm believer of an open dialogue, let's work, everybody on that works for mental health, let's work on prevention.
Yeah, no,
because I don't see prevention anywhere. I just see, you know, focusing on mental health issues, but let's work on prevention. Let's prevent.
Okay, if we really want to prevent
health issues.
If we really want to prevent mental health, we need to be going into the junior schools and the infant schools and starting the conversation now. But if we can get the parents talking about it, that gets the kids talking about it. That breaks down the stigma.
And that is actually happening. I'm actually a project coordinator in Redbridge, and we're actually going into schools and we are talking. Being on this training means that my voice means I'm now talking dialogically to 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds, 2 year 10s, 2 year 11s, because I believe in open dialogue. So people will get the message, but we're also learning the message ourselves, and we need everybody to be on that same platform and spread it together, really.
Great, thank you, Shirley. We have time for one more question before lunch. Last comment.
Hi, I'm Martin Clement from Children's Services in Newham, and we ran a successful pilot between September and November where I work in relation to children who need help and protection, really, and how we can try and reduce risk to them. And I was wondering how open dialogue relates to reducing risks for children and families, particularly thinking about how we engage perpetrators of domestic violence by using this approach, really, and or, you know, parents who physically abuse their children as well.
Okay, so nobody's putting their hand up. There is a separate stream of research going on to open dialogue in children and family services. It's not hit the UK yet. There's a couple of countries in which they're doing these trials, and there's like there was recently an international conference that focused on that. So it's growing up. Our own stream is in adult services, but we do work with children and young people, and in a meeting we recently had grandchildren there and other people's children. We're learning also as part of the process for children to be very involved where they're part of the network and family, and Val teaches about that in our training. So in terms of our own project, it's a project for adult mental health services, but we do incorporate learning around how to work with children and at-risk and vulnerable children and issues like this. But there is also a separate stream of research going on for children's services, and I've no doubt that it will start to pick up here. I do get lots of calls from people in children's services wanting to try to find research projects. So we're hoping to get some of our academics involved in some of that, and also expand the training out for that too. Okay, so thank you. One more? Yeah. Okay.
So my name is Alex, and I'm attached to the Trauma Centre in Boston. A lot of the people that access our services are in relationships which are traumatic and abusive. So intimate partner, violent relationships, juveniles actually who are in correctional facilities that are institutionally abusive or traumatic. So I'm wondering how this process works where your system, your network, is in itself abusive. Do you work with perpetrators?
Oh, I see. So what happens when there's an abuser or something like that in the network? Yeah. Well, first of all, the service user is in charge of who's in the network. So they make the choice. So we can't insist on other people being in the room who they don't want. Sometimes over time they might then invite other people once they feel comfortable and able to. But as we've been taught in our last module, for example, very forcefully by Mary Olson, who's the teacher of open dialogue up in Massachusetts, it makes very clear that where risk is involved, then you bypass the systems and you do have to engage in the way we engage at the moment in terms of dealing with risk. So where risk is involved, then you can't continue, you have to stop the meeting if necessary. But the service user themselves is usually in charge of who's in the room, and that might change and be fluid over time. Okay, so we have to stop there, and we'll be back at 10.